Hello and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining today. My name is Chris Mitchell. I'm the Chief Technology Officer here at Inflow Communications. I'm going to be leading the webinar today talking about disaster recovery. So if you're new to our webinar series, thanks for joining. If you've been around for a while and attended other ones, thanks for sticking around. On my screen, you should be able to see some of our upcoming webinars. A couple we just, I think, got added to the website today. So we have, next week, we have a practical resiliency for your contact center, talking about how to build in different redundancies. And then in October, we have a user training for using wrap-up codes in ECC. And then we also have an admin training for how to troubleshoot ECC with diagnostics. So we've had a lot of contact center requests lately. So we put some contact center webinars on the schedule. We have a few non-contact center webinars coming out in October as well. So kind of pay attention to our website, and we should have a few more of those being added for the month of October. All right, so quick agenda here. I'll do a quick introduction on Inflow. We'll jump into redundancy and disaster recovery scenarios, and then I'll save a little bit of time for question and answer at the end. I'll try to answer the questions as they come in throughout the presentation, on each section. But if you do have questions, feel free to post them into the question section. Like I said, I'll try to get to them throughout or at the end. If I can't answer a question on the call today, then we'll follow up via email, with an answer to that if I need to look something up or do a little bit of research on the question. So then we'll wrap up with just a quick contact us if you have any questions after the webinar, how you can reach out to us via phone or email to get follow-up questions answered. All right, so who is Inflow Communications? So we're a unified communications company with our sole focus on that in contact center. So all we do is phone systems and contact center solutions. We don't try to do anything else. We're a ShoreTel Mitel Platinum reseller, which is their highest level. We're a RingCentral delivery partner. So for cloud options, we have a Mitel cloud option, a RingCentral cloud option for PBX. And we're a delivery partner for them, so we can deliver and support RingCentral. And we're a Genesys Pure Cloud Gold partner, which is their highest level, so we can install and support Genesys Pure Cloud for cloud contact center options. So we try to give ourselves a few different options for cloud and premise-based solutions for customers. We have employees in offices in 10 different states. We have just under 50 employees right now within the company. Those employees help support over 200,000 endpoints. I was just running numbers on this to kind of work on updating this, and we're almost at 250,000 endpoints, a little over 800 customers. So we're maniacal about customer experience. As you go to our website, you can look at live stats from our phone system and our Salesforce reporting system. We track, customer stats, response times, customer satisfaction, all this stuff, and we report them live to our website. So our customers span all kinds of different, business sectors and types of business. So we have anything from, real estate to food and everything like that. So we're a nationwide company, so our customers are all over the place. All right, I'm going to hop right in here into the reason everybody is here today. So if you have a ShoreTel system, or if it's a newer system or older system, disaster recovery and redundancy is probably one of the biggest topics we get. And I look back, and we actually hadn't done this topic in almost for the premise-based side. We did it for cloud and stuff like that, and SIP redundancies, but we hadn't really talked PBX redundancy for like 18 months or 2 years. So it was a good topic to kind of retouch on. So we're going to be talking through like 7 different levels of redundancy that you can build into your premise-based PBX. Obviously, we've had other conversations and webinars where we talked about how you can use the cloud as a backup, but this conversation is going to be solely about what you can build into your on-site phone system, for redundancy capabilities. So a lot of this will apply to multi-site, but a lot of it still applies if you have a single-site phone system. You can build a lot of the same redundancies in for single-site as well. So I do see one question here I'll answer before I get started here. Got a question that says, how many support engineers do you have? So We have 15 support engineers just dedicated to our support team. So all they do is take incoming, ticket requests and stuff like that. And then a manager that sits over the support team. And then we have another 6 engineers on our project team. And all they do is install and update existing customer phone systems. So in all, it ends up being about 21 engineers on the support and project side of the company, just maintaining and supporting, our ShoreTel customer base. All right, so this is my overview slide here. We're going to talk about all of the redundancy capabilities, and then we're going to go through some failover scenarios afterwards, like, if certain things fail, what's our redundancy capabilities? So first off, the most important thing when we're talking disaster recovery is the planning and architecting of your ShoreTel system to make sure you have the most redundancies as possible. Obviously, sometimes cost is a factor, so we try to help customers figure out from a cost perspective which of the redundancies should we implement. So in this design, I've built multiple redundancies, starting with DVSs at the headquarters site. So you can see the headquarters site is Portland here, and we have the ShoreTel headquarters server, and we also have a DVS server. By installing that DVS at the headquarters, all the voicemail boxes, auto attendant, desktop clients, work groups can be offloaded from the headquarters server, allowing us to have that redundancy if the headquarters server goes down or needs to be rebooted. All of those features are running on the DVS. But if the DVS goes down, those features roll over to the headquarters server. The second thing we've done in this setup is we have a DVS in San Jose. So San Jose is a remote site. We put a DVS out there. So that local site now has auto attendant, voicemail, workgroup, desktop client control locally, which means we don't rely on MPLS or WAN connection to provide those services to customers, or to employees, sorry, and giving us survivability. The third thing we've done is we've put ShoreGear IP switches, or ShoreTel switches at each site, so that it allows all the local phones to register to those local switches and reduce our our WAN traffic and connection requirements. The fourth thing we've done is we've done spare switches. So you see that each of the site has a spare switch. Those could be physical or virtual. In this case, they're physical because it's easier to represent a spare switch with a physical switch. But you could do it in virtual or spare, virtual or physical, sorry. With the spare switches, that gives us the ability, if we have a physical switch of that site go down, we have local switches that can take over hunt group and IP resources, for those switches, so that we're not having, to route back to another site for those IP resources. The fifth thing we have is we have local dial tone at each site. So, reduce the dependency on another site if a site has its own dial tone in that case. So we have local, inbound and outbound routing, but it also gives us capabilities for least cost routing. If I'm in San Jose and I call a Portland phone number, I can route across the MPLS and use their dial tone, for outbound, least cost routing. Option 6 here is with the dial tone. If we choose a carrier who has, like DID or trunk group failover capabilities, we can automatically have DIDs forwarded from one site to another site in the case of an outage. So you see that with the inbound PST and failover, line between the two. So if we're using mostly, I would say, SIP providers, but you can with some PRIs, if it's a SIP PRI, they can all automatically do failover as well. So having a carrier who could do inbound failover, the ShoreTel system can handle outbound failover, but we need the provider to handle inbound, failover, because that's on their network. So we can't control the inbound. So we need to pick a carrier that can help with failover routing between trunk groups. And the last thing we have here is we have an MPLS or a WAN connection, whatever you want, what that happens to be. But in this case, you can see we also have a backup VPN connection. So this could be handled with an SD-WAN service, or just with a router that has a backup VPN and a primary internet connection between the two sites. By having a redundant WAN set up in this case, we can, all our eggs aren't in one, internet basket. So like I said, SD-WAN or a multiple, internet connection like this, if MPLS goes down, all the, the site-to-site routing in this ShoreTel, switch updating and routing table updates can all be done over the backup VPN. So we have a redundancy built in for that. So those are the 7 levels of redundancy that are available inside the ShoreTel system. And then, like I said, is the next, I think there's 5 more, scenarios. We're going to be talking about when one particular thing fails, how does the redundancy, take into effect that we've built into this system. So this would be ideal if you had, every single type of setup available or redundancy available. This is kind of what it would look like for a 2-site. And we can also if we added 3 or 4 more sites, we just duplicate San Jose for our additional sites if we wanted to have all the same levels of redundancy in place. All right, before I hop over to the next slide, I'm going to answer a couple questions here. I got a question from Joel. It says, can the DVS server handle taking locations in and out of on and off hours? So yes, all of the servers can apply schedules on that. The one thing you typically can't, like on a hunt group or whatever, the hunt group is on a switch, and that switch points to a server, and that server, has to be available in order to make call handle or schedule changes. So if a server is down, we need another server to be able to, to apply schedule changes. One note on schedules as well is all schedules are based in the time zone, of the server, whatever time zone the server that they're assigned to is making changes. So yes, any of the DVSs or the headquarters server can apply schedule changes. One other question here from Byron. It says, can we have a spare switch located at HQ that will act as a backup switch for other sites? So yes. In this case, I have a spare switch in San Jose. That spare switch in San Jose will only work for San Jose. But the spare switch in Portland, because Portland is the headquarters, that spare switch will work for failover in Portland or a failover in San Jose. The big thing with having all your spare switches located in Portland is you rely on your MPLS connection. So most of our customers do only put spare switches at their headquarters because they can work for all sites, but we just got to make sure we take into account that that's going to require the MPLS. All of those phones and hunt groups would fail over to the spare switch in Portland, which means all of our call buildup and teardown and hunt group routing is going to go across the MPLS, which typically isn't that big of a deal short term. And we know typically when a spare switch kicks in, it's a short term solution. That's not our long-term permanent fix. So yes, you could put 3 spare switches in Portland, and that can provide all the spare switching for, say all 5 of your sites or something like that. So yes, that is a good question, Byron. All right, so let's hop over. So our first scenario here is we lose our WAN connection between 2 sites. So maybe we have some fiber that's cut, from the carrier or something like that, or we have a power outage, somewhere in between our San Jose and Portland sites. Main MPLS goes down. So when the MPLS goes down, we lose extension to extension calling between sites. We lose syncing between the servers and the switches. The system does support PSTN failover, which means if I try to call, Chris, if I try to call, Mike's extension at 1234, and in Portland, I'm in San Jose, the system can automatically be built to say, oh, Mike's extension isn't routable. Let's dial his DID and just grab the dial tone in San Jose and go out my dial tone in San Jose, in my dial tone in Portland. So PSTN, that's called PSTN failover, that is supported in the system. Also, when the MPLS is down, we can't make changes to the San Jose site using Shoreware Director because the Director site, the Director headquarters server in Portland needs to be able to push changes down to San Jose, and without the MPLS up and running, we don't have that ability. So this is where that backup VPN really comes into play. If we don't have that backup VPN, San Jose is a standalone site, and it can still take and receive calls. We still have auto-attendant voicemail workgroup because that server's providing all that. We have local dial tone. So really San Jose, the only thing they're missing out on right now is changes to the system. We can't make any changes while it's down, and we lose extension to extension calling unless we're doing PSTN failover. So this is where that backup VPN kicks in. The router says, oh, my primary route across the MPLS is down. Great, I'll just route the connection across this backup VPN. So now we still have extension to extension calling, and we still have syncing of the databases, between the headquarters server and the San Jose server and switches. So that's where that backup VPN comes into place. If you don't have that, your system in San Jose will still function, but you have a couple limitations on that. If you were in San Jose without a server, and the MPLS went down, you can send and receive calls, but you're going to lose auto attendant, voicemail, desktop client, and extension-to-extension calling and changes. So there's a lot more things you lose if you don't have a local DVS in San Jose when your MPLS goes down. So pretty common. With the SD-WAN coming out, we see a lot more customers going to, having multiple connections between sites with SD-WAN. When customers were on MPLS with backup VPN, it was less common, but with SD-WANs becoming more and more popular, we are seeing a lot more customers have redundant internet connections between sites. So, all right, I don't see any questions I didn't answer yet, so I'll hop over to the next scenario here. So in this case scenario, in Portland, we lose our dial tone. So SIP provider, has a big outage or something like that, or our PRI provider has a big outage, in our Portland. So when our PSTN or dial tone at one site goes down, using inbound DID failover and least cost routing, we can allow the users at one site to place outbound calls using another site's dial tone. So we can automatically route the calls out another site. For inbound calls, the carrier will be the inbound calls will be redirected by the carrier to the other site, where the phone system will route the calls to the original destination using a DNS or extension routing. So in most cases, you'll need SIP, like I said, or a PRI delivered as SIP to be able to do a PRI to do inbound failover or carrier failover routing. So in this case, Portland goes down. I call a Portland phone number. The call comes in. The carrier says, "Oh, my SIP trunks in Portland are down. Where's my backup route? Oh, my backup route is San Jose. Great. Let me forward this call to the San Jose SIP trunk." San Jose takes that call. The call comes in that PSTN little cloud. It hits the switch, and the switch says, "Oh, this is a Portland phone number. Let me look at my routing table. Oh, this is a call destined for Chris. Great. Let me grab this call. Let me send it across the MPLS back to Portland. Portland hands it to the switch, and then the switch in Portland then hands it off to my phone." So we can still take our inbound calls. We just utilize the MPLS and set, to send that call back to the original destination. That's all handled with with DNS routing typically. So inside the system, we have DNS routing that we can build into the San Jose trunk group and the Portland trunk group. So we can say, if a Portland phone number comes in San Jose, here's how you route it. And in Portland, we say, if a San Jose phone number comes in, here's how to route it. So we can build in that failover routing ahead of time, so that when a call does fail over, it automatically routes to the correct destination at the other site. If we were to lose WAN or our MPLS and our PSTN, the call comes in San Jose and we can't route that call to Chris in Portland, the voicemail server in San Jose would simply take a voicemail for Chris. And then when the MPLS comes back up, that server in San Jose would say, hey Portland, I got a voicemail for Chris. Here you go, and it would send it over to me. Then my phone would start blinking the light, and I get an email notification that I had a voicemail. So there is multiple redundancies built into that DVS to take voicemail messages and play auto attendance as needed if we can't connect to another site or to another site where a call was destined for. All right. So phone switches down. So I would say this is probably the most common thing. We get, we lose a network, or power, in a rack or something like that, or we have to reboot a switch, causing it to go down. So in this case, I'm talking about an IP phone switch. I'm not talking about a dial tone switch. So I'm talking about a ShoreGear 90, 50, some 30, one of those switches, or a newer ST100 or 50A. So when a ShoreGear switch goes down due to power loss or network loss, a spare switch at that site or the headquarters site will take over all IP phones and hunt groups for the down switch. When this occurs, current calls will not be affected. That's the cool thing, is calls don't run through these switches. Call buildup and teardown runs through on those switches, but not the actual call. So when the phone's ringing, it's running through the switch, but once the call gets picked up, it's no longer running through the switch, and it's running, between the phone and the dial tone, or phone and phone if there's two internal users. So the failover typically takes a few seconds when we fail over between, a primary switch and a failover switch. The only affected device when this happens is analog connections. So if we have paging, fax, backup and analog lines, those are the things that are only affected is stuff that's physically connected to the analog port on the front of those switches. All of the IP phones, or SIP phones even, and hunt groups can fail over to the spare switch. That failover happens automatic, but the fail back is manual. So we don't want to fail back to that switch if that switch is still having problems. So you will have to, from an IT level, manually fail back to the primary switch from the spare switch when it fails over. Let's see here. Let's see. Question-wise, I did see another question come in. It says, "Can a virtual switch be utilized as a spare?" Yes. So if you're on 14.2, spare switches can be physical or virtual in VMware. If you're on Connect, spare switches can be virtual in VMware or Hyper-V or physical switches. So, there's not a limitation, as far as in Connect. You can do everything in Hyper-V that you could do in VMware in 14.2. So if you're still on 14.2 right now, VMware or physical switches, but as you go upgrade to Connect, then you could take advantage of spare switches inside of Hyper-V as well. Let's see, other switch here is what type of switches can be used for spare switches. So you can use any switch for a spare. So I could use a 30, a 50, a 90, or the newer 50A, 100A. I can even use an SG220T1 as a spare switch. The one thing to note is if I put an SG50 in as my spare and an SG90 fails, the 90 can handle 90 phones, but the 50 that's a spare can only handle 50 phones. So I wouldn't be able to handle all of the phones that failed over if there's more than 50 phones in that 90. So what would happen is the first 50 phones that register with that switch would fail over. The rest of them would go to no service. So, and there's no way to prioritize which phones fail over. It's just the first 50 phones that connect to that reach out to the 50, fail over. So sometimes the intern's phone fails over to the 50 and the CEO's phone doesn't. So no way to control that. So I would recommend doing either virtual spare switches or putting in spare switches, physical switches that are as big of, is like if at least 90s or whatever the biggest switches you're using, put one of those same switches in as a physical spare so you don't have a set number of phones that can't fail over. Spare switches can fail over, I think, 250 phones minimum. So that's the smallest spare switch. So that's plenty of phones. All right, so we lose a DVS. This is the next down scenario. So, maybe you're in Portland or you're in, San Jose and your DVS, server goes down. That DVS, like we talked about, handles local voicemail, local auto attendance, local work groups, and local desktop control. So when the DVS goes down, all users' voicemail boxes will be taken over by the headquarters server. So all auto attendant requests will be forwarded to the headquarters server, and all work groups will be routed to the backup destination. So every work group has a backup destination. Typically, we recommend setting that backup destination as a work group on the headquarters server or to a hunt group. Usually the biggest issue affecting users when a DVS goes down is that the desktop client may not redirect traffic to the headquarters server. So sometimes they have to either exit communicator or relaunch communicator, or communicator might not work in some cases, but typically it will auto redirect. But we have had a few versions where that the client didn't work. But the voicemails, auto attendance, and work groups will auto fail over. So the day-to-day running of your business shouldn't be affected by a DVS failing, because the headquarters server will take over all of those roles. We got one question here. It says, is there any special licensing required to spin up a virtual switch to serve as a spare or even as an active primary switch? So virtual spare switches are free. So you can spin up as many virtual spare switches as you want. You can spin up 100 of them if you wanted to. I don't know why you would need to. There's no cost to that. When a primary switch fails and that spare switch now becomes primary, like a production switch, you now have 45-day window to either license that virtual switch for production use, or to fail back to the other switch and return that to a spare. So you do have a 45-day window, because virtual switches are licensed, but you can use them for up to 45 days, in production when they fail over. before you have to return them to the spare or buy those licenses. One other question here. It says, is there licensing required for DVSs? So yes, there is a one-time DVS license in order to spin up DVSs. In 14.2, those DVSs have to be a Windows server or a VM. And then once you go to connect, you can do a VMware or Hyper-V Linux server. I think you can actually do a 14.2 Linux server in VMware as well, if I remember right. So there is a license either way for a DVS to be put in Portland and in San Jose in this case. And then, like I said, it either needs to be a Windows server or there's a Linux ISO that ShoreTel provides that you can spin up without having to license a Windows server. You can spin up a Linux DVS as well to provide those auto-attended voicemail services. But there is a one-time charge to buy a DVS license. All right, I think I got all those questions answered. All right, so HQ server goes down. So when the HQ server goes down, this usually means your phone system is, is kind of limping along. But since we have local DVSs at the headquarters site and in San Jose, we can offload a lot of those responsibilities from the HQ server. So in this case, the only thing we're going to lose is we're going to lose Shoreware Director. So we can't make changes, run reports, look at the directory, stuff like that. But all of our voicemail boxes, auto attendant, work groups, desktop clients are all handled by the DVSs. So having the headquarters server go down doesn't cripple our phone system in this scenario because we have those DVSs to handle everything besides the administration of the system, really. So the only other thing you would lose in this case is if you had any advanced applications running in your headquarters server, they would also be down. So maybe you had like ShoreTel Call Recorder or the emergency notification app or something like that. Those apps would obviously be down as well, but the day-to-day use of the system would still be fully functioning off the DVSs. One question here is multi-supergroup lost when HQ server goes down? It depends on where you have that supergroup application loaded. So if you're using the supergroup for paging application, that application gets loaded onto a server and to be ran. That application can run on a DVS or the headquarters server. You can't run it on multiple servers at the same time. You have to pick one or the other. So it would just come down to where you installed that application. If it was installed in HQ, yes, but you can. We have customers who build up like an app server and they install all of those just on an app server, outside of the DVS and the headquarters server. So it just comes down to where you install those advanced applications. You could install them on headquarters or on a DVS or on just a standalone, what we call an app server, a TAPI server in that case. From a headquarter standpoint, there was a question that was posed: can you use like high availability options? So in VMware, high availability and vMotion are both fully supported. So you can take advantage of high availability mode to kind of move your server between that. Same thing in Hyper-V. You can use clustering inside a Hyper-V to be able to move that virtual image between multiple hosts if you have a host issue or something like that. So that you can do some additional redundancies utilizing VMware or Hyper-V for your headquarters server. All right, good. We're almost on time here. So last thing is the Portland site. If we lose our main headquarters site, maybe that whole building just lost power. So when your headquarters site goes down due to power loss or natural disaster or something like that, the San Jose site will continue to function as a standalone site. The ShoreGear switches and utilizing the dial tone ShoreGear switches and local DVSs. So we have a few options if the HQ site is going to be down for a long time. First, we could do, if you're using VMware and have an offsite backup, we can restore the headquarters server, at San Jose or at another location to kind of get the system fully functioning back up. We can also restore the headquarters server, in San Jose so that the San Jose DVS and the headquarters server can be there. So really, it comes down to if you have an offsite backup, we're able to restore that. If you have vMotion or something like that, where you can, or a full VMware backup, a virtual machine backup, you can restore that virtual machine maybe at a data center or something like that and spin it back up. So In this case, San Jose would continue to function as is with voicemail auto attendant, local dial tone, desktop client all working perfectly fine, but we would not be able to make any changes or do any reporting off the system until we were able to get that headquarters server back up. So backups are very important, and more importantly, offsite backups are really important. So that if you have a power outage or a natural disaster occur, you want to be able to have a backup of your ShoreTel server that can be restored to a different location if there's going to be an extended outage. All right, so I don't think I see any questions that came in that I didn't answer. So if you have other questions, I'm right at my 30-minute time, so I think I did okay. If you have other questions that we didn't answer, or you didn't think of right now, feel free to put a call into us, call your account manager, give a call to our sales team, or send us an email at Inflow Communications. We're more than happy to hop on a call, grab a sales engineer, and talk through your particular disaster, your DR scenarios or your needs, and design a custom, setup for your system. We're more than happy to do that. We work with customers all the time. I probably do 2 or 3 customer calls a week where we're doing that exact thing. We're designing a DR setup for the customers. So reach out to us if you have any questions, and we look forward to seeing you on another webinar in the future. So thanks for your time today.